Is it all right?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear professors, dear colleagues, this presentation represents the current state of my dissertation with the title Border-Crossing Female Artists Between Experimental and Popular Music since 1970 to the present in Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. My focus of this research are Serbians, Bosnia and Herzegovina, originated Yugoslav female artists who have crossed stylistic boundaries between experimental, popular punk, new wave, minimal, and electronic music since 1970 to the present day. On this slide, we can see the migration of the chosen artists. Marina Abramovic, born in Belgrade in 1946, ex-Yugoslavia. She grew up in Belgrade and left the country in 1970s when she had her performance in Edinburgh. In 2001, she moved to New York. In 2019, she moved to London. Milica Peranosic, born in Belgrade in 1970, she left Belgrade in 1994 to study at Juilliard School, where she teaches today. Svetlana Bukvic, born in Sarajevo in 1967, she left in 1992 to New York to study. Lena Lovic, born in 1949 in Detroit, America, but with migration parents during the war in 1940s. Her father was from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Alexandra Slađana Milošević, born in Belgrade, 1955, the pop icon in punk, hardcore rock musical world in Serbia. She lived in Los Angeles during the 1990s while she was working with musicians. She returned to Belgrade in the 2000s. Ana Milosavljević, born in Čačak, Serbia in 1970, with her crossover violin style, she got a scholarship and moved to New York to study in 1993. A point of significant interest is that many of these female artists live today in New York City. On this slide, we can see the list of female artists who has influenced or were the influence, as well as collaboration between them. It is interesting to see that today the well-known pop icon Lady Gaga was influenced by Serbian performance artist Marina Abramovic. Abramovic collaborated with Lady Gaga album Art Pop, the third studio album by the singer, in 2013. Milica Peranosic piece, one-woman multimedia show Confessions, is partly influenced by minimal music and electronics from Laurie Anderson. Svetlana Bukvic was influenced by Kate Bush. Some of the influences can be heard in her works. Alexandra Slađana Milošević music is concentrated on punk, hard rock style. However, it could be seen in her performances an influence of Nina Hagen, especially in her works in the 1990s. It is a possible influence of Diamanda Galas and Lydia Lunch. Ana Milosavljević represents a crossover violin style. Lena Lovic collaborated with Nina Hagen on a song, Don't Kill the Animals. They have influenced each other through their friendship. David Bowie is definitely an influence for a lot of artists, especially in my research. My main question of this dissertation are: which aspects of the pre- and post-war history of ex-Yugoslavia have influenced the Serbian and Bosnian and Herzegovina art scene? What is the importance of female Serbian and Bosnian and Herzegovina artists in the diverse field of crossover? How do they use music, literature, and performance to tell stories? To answer on these questions, I was directed by my main methods: historical research, social network analysis, musicological analysis, which includes storytelling and performance interviews. My main reference is Alenka Barber-Kersovan and the aspect of diaspora according to social network analysis. Quote, Im Anschluss an die Kriege in Slowenien, Kroatien, Bosnien und Herzegowina sowie Serbien sind einige neue Staaten, Slowenien, Kroatien, Bosnien und Herzegowina, Mazedonien entstanden. Die Kämpfe kosteten schätzungsweise 350.000 Menschen das Leben und zwangen mehr als 3,5 Millionen Menschen zur Flucht. Serbien und Montenegro kündigten 1992 die Gründung der Föderativen Republik Jugoslawien an, die sich als Nachfolgestaat der ehemaligen sozialistischen föderativen Republik Jugoslawien verstand. 2003 ersetzte die Staatsverbindung Serbien und Montenegro die bis dahin bestehende Bundesrepublik Jugoslawien. End of quote. Diaspora and migration in musical expression leads to the following questions. How can we hear the experiences of the country of residence in the chosen musical pieces? The new musical landscape of USA, New York. How can we hear the experiences of the homeland in the chosen musical pieces, the old musical landscape of Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina? An example is today featured composer and performer Svetlana Bukvic and her electroacoustic piece Before and After the Teke. Svetlana Bukvic is a composer, pianist, and music producer. She was born in Sarajevo on the 9th March 1967 in former Yugoslavia. She is one of the 20 most successful female composers in America. Under harrowing circumstances that read like a political war thriller, she escaped her city of Sarajevo to Belgrade, where the American Soros Foundation provided her a scholarship and a one-way ticket to America, where she could pursue her education at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. She is currently assistant professor at City University of New York and has previously held positions as adjunct professor at Pratt Institute and New York University. Before and After the Teke is composed for amplified violin, electronics, voice, and bass. Svetlana Bukvic started to compose this piece after her visit Teke in Bosnia and Herzegovina when she was back to New York in 2006. In this composition, we can hear the musical diversity and mixing different styles from Balkan beats and melodies to contemporary music sounds of New York City. In the recording that we heard is a violinist Ana Milosavljevic, who commissioned this piece in 2006, and on the electronics and keyboard is Svetlana Bukvic. The premiere of this piece was at the Times Center, New York in 2008. The score shows us only the violin part, which was provided by the composer. And the graphic under the score shows us a waveform of the audio section, including electronics, which was exported from the musical program Audacity. The duration of the piece is 8.5 minutes. The composition starts with a solo cadenza in the violin, establishing the basic thematic idea from bar 1 to 9. In bar 10, we hear electronics coming in, a sustained pad sounds in a perfect fifth on the note G and D, and the rising bass, which reaches its goal on the A flat, which then are connected with violin and expand the musical material it originally set up. Beginning from bar 28 to bar 35, a three-note pattern G, A flat, and F emerges, which repeats and keeps changing the tempo and revolves around the note G, which is the center of the oscillation in the whole composition. The new environment we can hear in the electronic part combining with the instruments, and the Balkan can be heard in the accent evolving around the notes F, G, and A flat. The pattern, even though just staying within the short chromatic region from F through to A flat, shifts the accentuation as well as alternate the player's articulation. In the first part of the piece, we can hear the hip-hop elements which represent the New York environment and space. The electronics form more and more elaborate ensemble, commenting and complementing with different instrumentations on the elements introducing by the solo violin. This theme section is connected with a hip-hop beat which lasts for about 30 seconds, the electronics until bar 167, which again ends on a single note G. The second part, or middle section, reaches from bar 168 until bar 222. It begins with a freely played but notated 5 bars long solo violin cadenza. From bar 172 on, we hear the sound of breath and water in the electronics, which brings the composition to a calm and peaceful moment, further concluded in the violin. Additionally, a harp-like sound enters, as well as low gongs and string harmonics. Here is represented peace, creating a timeless space. Breathing is the entry into synchrony with nature and multidimensionality of time, bending time portal. Herzegovina has a great deal to do with this piece. The violin and the analog Moog synthesizer can play microtonally. Unison, they create the sound of the present and the past united. Tone G is the center oscillations, frequencies that are offset but close. On this picture, we see the Tekje Dervish Monastery at the Buna River in Blagaj, Bosnia and Herzegovina, where Mrs. Bukvic visited in July 2006. Dervish is a term that denotes a Muslim mystic, the mystical teaching of Islam. Tekje means the place where Dervish Islamic teaching were gathering. From bar 196 until 207, we have a new situation, a kind of typical Balkan rhythm in a 7/8, 3+2+2 meter, again with the tone G as the basic center, which although is a bit obscured later on. A pizzicato sound as well as lyricless voice are coming in and sing the theme. It is interesting to note that the 7/8 meter can't be really felt in the recording, as almost all elements in that section are mostly long sustained notes as well as rather extended melodic lines. A basic groove can be made out, but the way the melody's rhythm creates a soft dancing feel with hemiols, the meter structure is therefore willfully obscured. The connection between electronics and violin is organic, where one begins, the other it ends. And it is very important to look at the violin as an integral part of Moog, vice versa. Violin clenching is also present in the electronics, and tone G is tempered everywhere, a constant, something a listener can get hold of. In bar 223, we have a meter change from 7/8 into 11/16, note pattern 4 plus 4 plus 3, with a holding note on high G and electronic chromatic bass pattern we have known from earlier occurrences in the piece.
Without you, the distant foreign lands hurt more. And the empty roads. And the strange dreams that I have even when I'm awake. That I can't chase away without you.
This part is constructed with a pattern of the notes G and D and later F, C, D and F sharp. Here is represented sound of New York, old Europe and ethno-magic realism and spirituality. This is achieved following the spoken words of the text in the audio. Quote, "Without you, the foreign distant lands hurt more, and the empty roads, and the strange dreams that I have even when I'm awake that I can't chase away without you." End of quote. This means in German, quote, "Ohne dich tun die fernen fremde Länder mehr weh, und die leeren Straßen, und die seltsame Träume, die ich habe, selbst wenn ich wach bin, die ich ohne dich nicht verfolgen kann." End of quote. As Mrs. Bookridge was inspired by the book, this text could represent her emotions to her homeland. The beginning of the sentence, quote, "without you," end of quote, seems to be addressed to her homeland and not to a person. This could represent a nostalgic meaning of the composition. In this piece, there is no compelling narrative, but circling around this subject. This sentence seemed to be the center of the composition. Meša Selimović was a Yugoslav writer born in Tuzla, Bosnia and Herzegovina, well known for his notable book Dervish and the Death, Dervish i smrt, written in 1966. The book Dervish and the Death is a famous book in the territory of ex-Yugoslavia, and it describes the time of Ottoman Empire in 18th century. Before and after the Teke appears on the composer's album Evolution in 2014. Quote, "Pre- and post-war history in Yugoslavia has undeniably influenced me as a composer. As with every social upheaval in the past, the hierarchical structure offered a unique look at what forces create us and change us. There are no markings about the note heads for my intonation measurements in cents. Instead, I electronically record the exact amount I want and then have the players learn by playing the altered scale note by note along with the tape until they internalize it. Then they move on to playing within the syntax of the piece. I found that this is a much better way of learning than going by numbers. Microtonality, for the lack of better word, for me is not a mathematical formula. It comes from the music, the language that unfolds with a need for imagining new sonic possibilities and with the way we choose to think about them and interpret. Ultimately, it provides for an expanded emotional universe, and that in the world of dumping down that we live in is a good thing." End of quote. Analyzing chosen musical pieces and composers through their interviews during this time, I found that the time pre- and post-war period in former Yugoslavia have affected them all in different ways, where many of those subjects happening during 1990s in former Yugoslavia are connected in their compositions. As mostly all of those female Serbians and Bosnia and Herzegovina composers live in New York City since 1990s, I conclude that they also form a unique circle of composers in the USA, as they all know each other personally, and some of them have worked together. There are works which have self-therapy aspect and can be connected to the migration experience. This research has been investigated since 2017 throughout several interviews with the artists and their collaborators with their musical examples. However, it will be further explored by all means of border-crossing musical examples. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Marina. Very well-timed video, as we discussed earlier. We have a couple of minutes left, and I think Javia's got a question. I don't know if he wants to ask it verbally.
Yeah, so for Maria, I'm just thinking, because for instance, for me, it's very technical, a lot of technical knowledge, but I'm thinking, how would you like audiences to navigate through all this information that you have? How do you see it if we have the opportunity? Let's say if we have the open skies thinking, what will be the best way to show this kind of information to general audiences?
You mean you ask actually for the analyzing particular music piece?
So because I'm thinking that you are like creating all these relationships of all the different cultures and storylines through the music.
Yes.
To my understanding. So all this social collaboration that happens to music, how do you think? How can we see them like in that whole universe of knowledge that you gather now? How can we see that?
Yes, actually, that is my research. This social network analysis between those composers that I have chosen, and actually the circle of those American, actually the ex-Yugoslavian that lives mostly in America, that they are forming a circle, a special circle in America of those composers, and that's actually very interesting to do a research as we don't have enough materials of those female composers today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria.